we've been gone, at least in terms of an MMA show on MCR for some time, so let's get right to the news, which has been dominated largely, of course, as expected, by Conor McGregor announcing his return to fight Donald Cerrone at the main event of UFC 246. No interim belt on the line, fighting at 170. Obviously, there are 2 pending rape investigations into Conor McGregor. Seem to have a obvious black cloud over the announcement of this fight, him just fighting, period. And sort of a 2-part question. Do you think that that UFC should be in the business of Conor McGregor right now and promoting him right now with those pending rape investigations? And for a moment, tabling that if we can, which is insane to say, thoughts on McGregor-Cerrone as a matchup? One that I said was the right tune-up matchup to have if he was going to come back.
All right, so let's talk about the fight itself before we dive deeper into it, because that obviously is going to be a deeper, darker conversation. As far as the matchup of Donald Cerrone welcoming Conor McGregor back to activity, it's perfect. It's perfect, and I think it's perfect for both men. And this is an angle that I think a lot of people are ignoring. Donald Cerrone is a certified star in his own right. Definitely not the level of McGregor, but he's a guy who has paid his dues. He's a guy who fights so frequently, and fans love him. Everywhere he goes, it's fanfare and it's fun. So if anyone deserves this big money fight, if anyone deserves the spotlight, when you have a BMF title being contested between gentlemen with the records, and no disrespect to Nate Diaz or Jorge Masvidal, when you've got that level of big money into guys who are otherwise considered journeymen, man,
especially in other combat sports, at least.
Yeah. Dude, give the bag to Donald Cerrone. Give Donald Cerrone the chance to have this big pay-per-view main event. Let him do that, and I think he's earned that. Now, as far as for Conor McGregor, this is the perfect fight for him because you don't want to necessarily have an indestructible machine like Justin Gaethje in front of you when you've had this level of a layoff. And then on top of that, the trajectories of where they both have gone, wins and loss-wise speaking lately. McGregor was last seen tapping out to Khabib Nurmagomedov, and before that losing to Floyd Mayweather in another sport, albeit, but a loss nonetheless. Yes. And Donald Cerrone was last seen getting knocked out by Justin Gaethje and Tony Ferguson.
4 of his last 6 fights have ended via knockout loss.
Exactly. So just from a pure competitive standpoint, it makes more sense. And I'm so confused by the backlash about why this wasn't Justin Gaethje.
I think you have a section of fans that don't understand tune-up fights in MMA. Like, I really legitimately think that, and there's a huge section of MMA fans that come from a pro wrestling side where if big matches are there to be made, you make the big matches. And if you watch, WWE or AEW, there's weekly content that you see sort of big matches every week, and you see people continually match up against each other. I think there's an audience that comes from that section of combat sports that expects the same in MMA, and they've sort of been catered to in that aspect, right?
Right.
For a long time, there's been that aspect or that sentiment or narrative that there's no easy fights in the UFC. That once you get to that top 10, you are in that meat grinder, so to speak, until you retire. And in people's minds, Cerrone is a fighter outside that, which is weird because to me, he's not really outside that top 10, top 15 range.
He's a contender in 2 weight classes.
So I don't even understand. Like, I think there's an expectation of elite fighters in MMA to always fight elite competition, regardless of losing, regardless of time off. There's no concept of recuperating the body, recuperating the mind for combat.
Getting your timing back, and very simple things that boxing understands.
And I think, not to throw shade on this person, I think, I really respect this fighter, but like Dominic Cruz, to a large degree, has sort of pushed that narrative that like ring rust is a myth, that doesn't exist. No, it does. It absolutely does.
Just Dominic Cruz is an anomaly. That's what that's.
Yeah, he's an alien.
Anything, yeah.
He's not a human being. Okay,
and even though he was saying that ring rust isn't a thing, he still gave himself a pretty bad injury in the return fight against Dillashaw. So even for him, no, that's not.
Even the Mazugaki fight, he was out for another year and a half after that. I want to say.
Yeah, he tore something else after that fight. So
this is, combat sports in similar ways to maybe like certain positions in like NFL football. that the high impact rate means that your window of success or time in the sport is very limited. And to prolong that, boxers routinely take tune-up fights in between fights to prolong that. So they don't have to take a hard camp, they don't take a hard fight, don't take punishment, but still get a paycheck, still make ends meet.
Yeah, stay active.
Stay active. Yeah. And in MMA, that idea is just completely lost. Now, I think in a month's time when we get closer to this fight, I think people are going to forget about it because these two guys are going to have great back and forths on press conferences and promos. Like, this fight's going to sell itself regardless in ways that are probably even easier than a Justin Gaethje fight, which I know the hardcore fandom wanted, but this fight sells more to the casuals.
Yeah, like to say that, and a little while back you were saying like about the big fights. This is a bigger fight, at least when you're talking from a business standpoint. This is a bigger fight, just plain and simple, because you have two people that everybody recognizes as opposed to one person that everybody recognizes.
Or you have one person that everyone recognizes and one that's been such a long-standing UFC fixture that he has more drawing power within the fandom than Justin Gaethje, who has
by far.
Who has how many fights in the UFC? 4 or 5?
6 or something like that. But he
6 now.
I think so. I think so. But even like look at the fact that Donald Cerrone he has like major endorsements. Budweiser. He's on those P3 protein pack.
Yeah, he is. I see those commercials all the time.
Yeah. So this is a guy who is front and center out there all the time.
No, I just think that he cowboy.
Yeah.
Guy with the cowboy hat. Yeah. You know what I mean?
He's highlighted Fox cars. He's highlighted. Has he? No, I don't think he highlighted a Spike TV card. I don't know. He's highlighted WEC cards. He's highlighted cards or been co-main events in essentially every era of modern mixed martial arts. It feels like.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, well, yeah, this dude's been around. He's cut his teeth already.
He's been a perennial top 10 lightweight and welterweight for the last decade.
Yeah.
Maybe decade plus a little bit now. Maybe 2008ish. He was around in the WEC.
Yeah, sounds about right. Yeah.
But circling back to McGregor in terms of should he be fighting? Should the UFC be in the business of Conor McGregor right now? Can they be if they navigate it in just a more transparent way?
That's kind of the stance I take on. Like, because this is such a tricky thing to navigate. We do have to keep in mind that these are allegations that are being investigated. Now, if we're gonna go with the innocent until proven guilty model, well then until the guy has his day in court, all right, he shouldn't be stopped from making a living.
Yeah.
But when you're in the violence business,
and your crime is violence,
and you're on tape punching an old man, and there have been rumors about bad behavior in other ways. Let's not forget there was apparently that hit out on him from some sort of Irish mafia for beating up a drug dealer in the bars. So we've heard.
I forgot about that story.
We've heard a lot of stories. So like at some point somebody's got to pump the brakes and be like, something wrong here. Something is wrong. I don't know what the solution is. I'll say this. And forgive me if this is too loose of a stance to take, but I just want some sort of definitive statement from McGregor himself. Now, I know he can't say certain things because the legal process is moving, and I'm sure his lawyers have advised him to stay quiet about certain things. If he said a simple like, hey, I really want to talk about this, and I'll tell you everything when my lawyers say I can, I'm almost willing to be like, okay, we'll rock with it. Mm-hmm. To just act like it's not happening that's ugly, man. That's to steal a phrase from the Joe Budden podcast. That's nasty.
Nasty.
I'm not sure I can get down with that.
To add to that, I know it took for the first investigation 6 months for a reporter to ask Dana White about it. Please, one of you reporters out there, and I know some of you listen to this show, and you guys do the constant media run of every fight week. Ask Dana White. Okay, some of you guys that are more big time in obviously us or anyone else, like, you have the power, you have the leverage to ask these questions. Ask in a polite manner, PC manner, if you want, however you want to frame it, but ask the question.
The question needs to be asked. Like, I mean, Dana did address it at a scrum after the Contender Series some weeks back, and he said, "Hey, it just looks bad." He said it looks bad or something like that, and he gave a pretty blanket statement, no real information to glean. And I don't think you're really going to glean a lot of information, but the you have to say something. And now
Put out
an
official statement. I know his agent, what's agent?
Auditor.
He put out a statement, but again, not McGregor, not the UFC.
Yes,
just the optics of that seem off.
And it was such a vanilla statement. Like, I want some more passion behind what you're saying. A guy whose brand is built on passion, a guy who was applauded in some ways for his overuse of passion, throwing a dolly at a bus.
Some would say promoted that way. Oh, that literally was promoted.
That was, yes.
Oh,
yes.
I forgot.
They had like a graphic of glass breaking on the commercial, yes. So I want something, man. The thing is, you can't have shit like this just hanging out there. You can't. And especially, and I hate to even talk about this because, like, dude, just Walt Harris's Instagram post, Thanksgiving morning, man, I was reading that just full on crying, man.
Oh, yeah.
Tears rolling down my face, like, oh my God. When we're in the kind where violence against women is like affecting the sport. Granted, it's an auxiliary thing, but it's still a very real issue that we are seeing. Like, you can't have a guy who's accused of that level of violence against a woman or two women to just fight. Nobody say nothing.
And not to the degree yet, because we don't know, of course, yet. But John Copenhaver, and the War Machine, Chrissy Mack,
I think
Chrissy Mack story.
Yeah.
That is a prime, or Greg Hardy. I mean, like, there is Thiago Silva.
Right.
I mean, there's a long history of violence against women within this sport.
And we still, and actually was like
a
couple days after the unfortunate news of Nia Blanchard's death being confirmed, Cindy Danwa was beaten up by an ex-boyfriend. So, like, this is violence against women is a very real problem, and I'm not saying that it's a specific problem to mixed martial arts, but when mixed martial arts is sanctioned violence, you might, even just for the pure optics, even if you don't give a shit about human beings, just for the pure optics, you might want to address these things. You might want to put some energy toward making sure this isn't a problem on a regular basis,
and
man.
To be honest,
it's being promoted. Fuck.
And to be honest, you should give a fuck as a human being.
Yeah.
Like, you should care.
Like, so the only reason why I say that is because, unfortunately, there is this sort of like mentality does seem to creep about when certain fighters are on the docket.
Yeah.
This contingent of people who seem to be totally devoid of any sort of human empathy, any sort of moral obligation to society, that just want to say, "Oh, it's only about the fights."
Incels.
Yeah, fights and money. Like, okay, fam. Like, but there's a real world we're living in.
Yeah.
That I think we should give a shit about, especially when our business is violence in particular.
And forgive me, but the fighter in the UFC that was being up by her was a husband or boyfriend, and she was out.
Rachel Ostovich.
Her as well, but thank you for reminding me of that case, because that brought her out of a fight. That literally affected the sport.
Yes.
Like, there's no way you can argue like that those cases did not actually affect mixed martial arts. Women that fight in the sport were harmed in vicious crimes. Alexandra Lee, the neo-Nazi.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, right. Yeah.
Boyfriend,
Andrea Lee.
What was her name?
Andrea Lee.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Andrea Lee. Yeah.
And obviously, I mean, this issue is one that doesn't seem to really be talked about, doesn't really seem to be addressed by the institutions and entities that really are in power in the sport, a la the UFC, ESPN, even minor other promotions like Bellator and DAZN. This is a conversation that could really be more of an issue that is pressed And, when we talk about the UFC creating an entire PD policy as basically a way to protect themselves from lawsuits, they can't have any sort of policy or about violence towards women. Or I know that the Fighter Code of Conduct, but that's been largely thrown out.
Yeah, they did, but it doesn't seem to be being adhered to now. Like I don't like, I do want to once again acknowledge, these are allegations and innocent until proven guilty, but you still have to address the elephant in the room.
Absolutely.
Before we just carry on like nothing's going on. So
absolutely,
yeah.
Like if you're out there saying like I'd rather watch this stuff on the news, this is the news.
Yeah.
So that's what you're here for, to watch the news.
Yeah, this is fight news. So
I just don't understand this at all.
It's because there are a lot of stupid motherfuckers out there. That's what's up. So
yes.
But it is what it is, man. Like there's a certain level of knucklehead that just has to be dealt with when you are involved in combat sports, unfortunately. And
yeah. And like the sad part is that like I know in the MMA world, for a lot of people that are just purely MMA heads, they don't understand. Like they kind of have it easier than other combat sports, to be honest. The way women are treated within the UFC and MMA is far better than, let's say, boxing or kickboxing.
2-minute rounds. Fuck out of here.
I mean, women's, from a rule set standpoint in boxing, are treated as a second-class fighter. You don't have that in MMA. Like that in and of itself is a huge difference. But there are massive changes that need to happen within MMA to properly address how women are treated within the sport, violence towards them. And the biggest fighter of the sport, basically, probably the biggest fighter in combat sports at this moment, I would argue, other than maybe Floyd Mayweather, is out there having 2 pending investigations. That needs to be addressed. That needs to be talked about, more so than in any other case even, because he is the biggest figure. He's the one that's going to get, he's going to have the easy walk through ESPN. He's going to have the easy walk through media because everyone's going to be scared to address this issue.
You want him there. So, yeah, and let's and I will be more than willing to acknowledge that the sport is better with Conor McGregor around. It's more exciting. It's more interesting. Period. Like his presence is more interesting, and I welcome his return. But I'd like to see some real world issues that he seems to be mixed up with, addressed in some sort of real capacity before we just act like it's not going on.
Absolutely agree.